Afternoon. Welcome to Insight Jam's cybersecurity panel discussion this afternoon. I'm your moderator for today, Christine Sabino of Hayes Connor Solicitors in the UK. I'd now like to introduce the panel, starting with Wade.
Wade Lance with Illusive Networks. I'm the field CTO at Illusive. We're in the lateral threat management space. What attackers can do once they have penetrated the network. And so thanks for having me on today.
Thanks, Wade. And next we have Gerald.
Hello, Gerald Beuchelt. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for LogMeIn, and in that role, responsible for our internal and external security posture across the board. LogMeIn, we're a software as a service company focused in particular on identity and access management through our LastPass series of products.
Thank you. And Yanir?
Now I'm Yanir Laubshtein from NanoLock Security, VP of Cybersecurity Solutions. We at NanoLock defend the connected device. We are an on-device solution.
Thank you. And Safi?
Hello, I'm Safi Raza. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity at Fusion Risk Management. I've been at the company for about a little over 17 years. Fusion Risk Management is a cloud-based enterprise software for business continuity risk management. We help the organization prepare, manage, act in any situation with our unique combination of consulting services and software solution.
Thank you. And Nick?
Hi, Nick Santora, founder, CEO at Curricula, and we make learning cybersecurity awareness training fun. So we do phishing simulation, learning management system, basically teaching companies how to not get hacked.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a number of topics for this afternoon, but I'm going to start off with the general cyber security landscape, and in particular, during the international pandemic that we've all been under for most part of this year, how that's affected the cybersecurity landscape. Wade, would you like to start us off with the discussion, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So big changes this year in 2020 for cybersecurity teams, and I think folks are aware of this. The specifics have hit in several areas that we've identified, our customers have seen. One is that the work from home movement has really altered a lot of users' normal processes and behaviors. People connect at random hours from random locations, and so it's created a lot of pain for security teams around just establishing baselines of what's normal. A lot of cases there isn't a lot of normal. We've seen the attacking community respond in many cases with targeted documents, phishing campaigns, leveraging information that might appear to be legitimate COVID-19 information. Suggesting particular company responses to COVID and whatnot. So there's been a very strong, what we've seen, a twofold pain, if you will. On the one side, security teams are struggling to deal with a lot of the shifts in normal user behavior, and then on the other side, the attacking community is kind of leveraging these shifts in some of their social engineering. And also some of their communication efforts, and so we've seen a definite uptick in the difficulties for customers based on those two drivers. Been pretty pronounced.
Thanks for that, Wade. Yanir, have you been experiencing some of the same issues? Sorry, yeah, Yanir.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree with Wade. We do see a lot of attacks coming using the social engineering vector. We do see that security teams are working harder, if it's possible at all, than they used to work. And in a way, we do believe that the COVID-19 situation made us understand that technology will control everything, and people need to adapt themselves and their security mechanism to the new era. Definitely.
Thank you. And Nick, have you had to adapt your training products that you provide during the pandemic? Have you seen difference in training that has to be provided to workforces?
Yeah, I mean, most of the same stuff is still the same stuff. We're just now doing it from remote. And I think, IT teams are asked to do more with less. So more problems, more exposure, bigger scope, less budget, less resources to get it done. And, one thing that was kind of unique was the uncertainty of what's being communicated and how do you communicate with people. So stimulus checks and all this other type of advice that's getting sent around was an advantage for hackers. And we kind of expected our employees to know how to respond to that. So I think most organizations struggled on finding out different ways to communicate with their employees now that they are remote, and learning about the new and latest and greatest threats that hackers are using to basically fight against them with their employees. So it's been quite a year for sure for businesses to keep their employees safe.
Yeah. And how about, obviously, one of the biggest problems that we realized was everybody had to act quickly. So there was a quick lockdown, certainly in the UK and in many other countries around. And of course, there wasn't the provisions put there. So how did companies cope with that, the quickness of the changeover to remote working predominantly?
I think it really depended a little bit on what the situation for the company was prior to the lockdown starting to come in. We were in a lucky situation that as a remote working company, we were already kind of well prepared for this, and we already had a good part of our employee base already out there. We were very early on betting on SaaS as a means of back office service delivery. So it's like scalability issues through VPNs were not really a huge issues from our perspective. So we've seen this obviously very differently with other companies and with colleagues, and that was definitely a huge change. But I would say it definitely depended on how far down SaaSifying your business you were in terms of how difficult it was.
Lovely. Wade, would you like to comment there?
Yeah, I think I look, Gerald's smart and done well, right? He couldn't be more right? Organizations that were just generally more supportive of remote work were in good position and didn't incur a lot of new risk. Organizations that didn't have a lot of remote work, and what I've seen has been a fair amount of kind of the traditional deficiencies that we see in security, where priority one was to enable the work, right? And so a lot of VPNs were spun up, remote workers were connected and kind of, like, hey, let's get it stood up so that these people can work and be productive. And then afterwards, it's like they turn to the security teams and say, okay, how do we secure this now? How do we make this a secure environment for work? And so that we saw again kind of that classic, make it go first and then secure it later. And so I think the organizations that have leveraged SaaS solutions and remote capabilities were in a much smarter space. And I think that going forward, there should be increased impetus for people, even when the lockdowns begin to fall. Hopefully the lockdowns will begin to reduce. Organizations should work to enable remote working as a normal part of their processes and support it going forward so that they're not in this position again.
Yeah. Safi, would you like to come in there and add your comments to that?
Yeah, hi. And building on top of what already been said is the biggest threat today for any cloud user is really misconfigurations, right? So all of a sudden, the pandemic hit, and everyone is the closure started to happen, and everyone is running to set up some kind of remote workforce. The problem is some people who are already were able to work remotely, already have utilizing the cloud solutions were rather easy, as you heard these gentlemen. Able to change. However, there are far more companies, far more organizations, they were not able to quickly deploy them, right? And also then they are making changes. The problem is every time you, especially in the technology, when you're rushing, you are making mistakes. There are some some configurations that you did not have enough time to look through. You did not have a chance to QA properly, test properly, do a pen test maybe, right? So all these, or even any kind of risk assessment. So unfortunately, what I have seen around in the industry, a number of folks, they forego security. They did not focus security. Because the challenge was just get everyone up and running.
Yeah.
Security unfortunately came afterwards. So that is kind of still an issue. People are still going back and fixing it, but then again, that leaves a huge gap when it comes to the cloud security, especially.
And so, what can companies do with the increased threat, with the increased remote working at home, and also the hybrid? One of the problems I see is that there is a mixture. So we're working remotely, and then we're working in the office, and that interchange, to my mind, provides other security threats. Is that your concern as well, Gerald? Do you find that's happening?
Yeah, I think what is interesting in terms of like how we've been starting to change that is like I really like what Nick was saying. It's like in terms of like making sure that we keep the awareness and the information with our employees, because at the end of the day, it's like they're the first line of defense, and often the only line of defense really that we're having across the board. And I think it's super important to keep that in mind. One of the things I feel that's also important to keep in mind as we move forward is that we are really seeing now the final death knell, so to speak, for the traditional perimeter paradigm of defending company assets. We used to rely on firewalls for a long time. We realized as a security community many years ago that firewalls were not really the most effective way of defending in the more modern kind of infrastructure. And now we're starting to see, with everybody working remote, that identity really has become the key differentiator between that I have to use in order to determine whether somebody gets access to my services or not. So it's like the identity really is becoming the new perimeter, as has finally made the transition to become the new perimeter. And I think a lot of the difficulties that more traditional companies have seen with VPNs and with firewalls and getting access to stuff, scaling, etc., is that kind of like difficulty of really leveraging their identity environment in such a way that it can be brought to some other other platforms and architectures as well.
Nick, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, everything that's been said is pretty apparent. I think, IT security teams were asked to do an impossible job in a matter of days, if not weeks. And they never prepared or planned for any of this. It was not in anyone's plan, or at least most people's plan, to react so quickly to something like this. And now that we have reacted, I think everyone alluded to, like, now we're trying to bolt on security and all these other things after the fact. Well, I think this is a wake-up call for a lot of businesses to understand how people, process, technology all play together. And the biggest thing that we have seen is the lack of communication across the board. So it's not just the IT teams knowing what tools are in place. It's that every single employee knows how tools have changed over the past couple of days or weeks, and how to utilize those tools and what you should and shouldn't be doing. And that communication is really hard, right? Unless you have experts on your team that are focused on talking with every single employee, very hard to scale that operation. So that's just something that we've seen is kind of the communication struggle is apparent in this industry for employees and IT teams to kind of work together.
Yeah. And that leads obviously to more of a threat and an easier landscape for those people who want to come and try and hack whatever information they can get from the companies that you assist and work with. Yeah. Yanir?
Yeah, I must say that some of our clients experience real change in the working cultures. We are addressing, critical infrastructures and traditional operational technology environment in which a person must be on the shop floor and deal with controllers and so on. And all of a sudden, they need to work remotely. In some of the cases, regulation cannot afford that. So it still is a great change in the culture of the of the landscape that we are dealing with. Obviously, the threat landscape increased accordingly. And as I mentioned earlier, we noticed that our clients and in the industry that we are working in are taking some huge steps towards a different defense approach. It's not just to detect after the attack, it's taking a major step to prevent it as possible as they can. So it's a huge change, and we are dealing with that on a regular basis. Again, our industry is a bit different. It's not the traditional IT, and we are facing the change, and we are dealing with it on a daily basis.
And Wade, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so I think Yanir is right. I liked what he said about cultural change and that people are disconnected. One of the changes we've seen this year is dramatic growth. We saw it actually in 2008 and 2009 with the impact there, but we're seeing it again with insider threat, right? Where people that are used to being in the office, people walking around, looking at your monitor, all kind of working together. Now those people are at home. And there's no one actually looking over your shoulder, and we've seen a rise. Our customers have seen a rise in users that are in some cases have tried to take advantage of that kind of a condition. So again, having a detection capability and visibility into what people are doing, we've seen a huge growth in insider threat in this last season, to be sure.
So internal threats from internal employees.
Vendors, contractors, partners, anyone with access that now might have been in an office where people could see, now they're not.
And that's interesting, because you always think of the threat being remote, but actually it's given way to what you were saying there, inside possibilities that perhaps wouldn't have been available to them previously to the remote working boom. Have the other panelists been experiencing that with their clients as well?
I mean, it opens the door up to where you come to the office, you are there on the computer. Well, now you're at home, and your spouse might be at home, and your kids might be at home. So unintentional misuse of those devices clearly can happen now because it's easy for it to happen. So yeah, plenty of stories on that, of things that have cats walking onto computers and little things like that. But it's a problem, and it's something that we didn't really prepare for.
No. Safi, you wanted to comment there?
Yeah, so Nick, I'll be okay with cat walking on the computer, and I'm sure you as well, and are more concerned about all these IoT devices. God knows what they're doing in your houses, right? We are in the holiday season, and a lot of new gadgets are in the market. Obviously, people will be purchasing it, adding it, without thinking about where exactly it's manufactured, what kind of firmware or security capabilities exist. So my biggest concern is my employees and myself and all of you guys as well. We are all sharing. We don't have a dedicated internet connectivity at home for work only. We are sharing it with the family members, and so this creates a problem. And how would you build a wall between your non-work computers and your work computers, right? Yes, IT guys, they may be able to create some separate VLAN or whatnot, but what about the average users? What about your C-level executives? All the data is being mingled, all the traffic being mingled with everything else, and it just more exposure, more there are additional risks that we have to take into account.
And that's being exploited by those who wish to hack and obtain the data, and it's being exploited because there's a gap there that's been created in the general pandemic, and everybody's faced with everything, not only in their working lives, I think, but it's entered into every aspect of your life, and it's all just changed dramatically. What can your clients do to secure their data moving forward as we head in and hopefully out of the pandemic and into hopefully the brave new world. What sort of things are you telling your clients to be doing now? Gerald, do you want to?
Yeah, sure, I can take that, absolutely. I think there's a bunch of things that really ought to be getting on top of people's mind. Really understanding that that the threat surface has changed, and this is here to stay, right? It's like we have really a significantly larger threat surface at this point in time, which really goes in and includes now a lot more offices and a lot more locations than what we have before. And this kind of work from anywhere paradigm is here to stay, like we found. That'll change a lot of the ways how security teams are going to be interacting with employees. It's also going to change in terms of like how you have to structure your response teams in ways that can really deal with this significantly increased surface and the associated increase in volume and speed of attacks taking place. So I think automation is a very critical element in this kind of thing. It's like getting ready to automate more mundane tasks as much as possible should be high on the priority list in order to get out of the manual kind of dealing with certain things. And like I was saying before, it's like really embrace identity as like a premier way of defending your networks as well. It's like as you start to see having all these kind of independent services, SaaS services, platform as a service, etc., being put together is like the identity that you can imply or that you can provide an employee with becomes incredibly valuable. So protecting that identity through multi-factor authentication, through the appropriate kind of other mechanisms that you can do, both from a monitoring as well as from a policy and proactive kind of perspective, that really makes the whole. That should be something that companies should be investigating right now, how far they are down that path, and if there's still some room, then it would definitely be super important to put this very high on the innovation list for the next year.
And that goes hand in hand, Nick, with the training requirements that the clients need and the companies need to put in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, a lot of the basics are the basics, and we just got to get people following the basics. And if we can do that, at least we can be on the same playing field to prevent against the most common ways people can get into, which is turning on two-factor. It's like just a common thing. Like if you just started there, we don't need to do these complex educational programs and really complex trainings. We just need to do the basics. But then the landscape has changed. So that's going to continue. So teaching people continuously about the newest threats that are facing them so they could be prepared for it, and treating that kind of environment as a safe place to learn and not as a penalty to get people upset or angry with their security teams, because we're all working together to fight against a common enemy. We need to act and treat it that way.
Yeah. And have all of you found that some of your clients will have the security in place and then they think that that's just enough, and then don't evolve with the landscape as it changes? Do you find that? Wade, have you found that?
Yeah, so I guess I like one thing Nick said about focusing on the basics. Look, if you don't have the basics down, none of the rest of it that you do is going to matter, right? So blocking and tackling is definitely a must. I will say one thing we've seen is when organizations think about maturing their security, what we saw that the pandemic and work from home really has exposed is that a lot of security teams leverage kind of the same approach in different areas over and over and over again, like behavioral analytics, right? The endpoint tool is using behavioral analytics, and the SIM platform is doing, behavioral correlation, and there's a network tool that's doing behavioral analytics. And look, behavioral analytics are great. We should do some of that, but it's more effective to use various capabilities, right? To have some deterministic detection available as well, because what we saw with the work from home movement is that behavioral analytics really struggle. I like what's been said. Gerald's been talking about, focusing on identity, right? Thinking about credentials and identities and where they're being stored and how they're being used, and that's critical. And having some detection capability, and again, I'm not just saying this because Illusive has a deterministic detection capability, but thinking about, hey, beyond just, the 7th generation of our firewall or the 8th generation of our endpoint controls, what other capabilities do you have to give us some deterministic views into what's happening, to really turn the tables back on against the attacker, put the pressure on them when they're in the environment, and those kind of differing kinds of approaches to security really give security teams advantage when they're not using just the same tool set across various functions.
Yanir, I think you wanted to comment there.
Yeah, I would like to argue something, and I would like to argue the detection thing, if I may, Wade. I do believe that organization, companies, entities, you name it, will be less tolerance in the future. Means they will use the zero trust approach. And I'm saying that because detection is, in a way, after something has happened. So we will not be tolerant to an event. We want to prevent it before it happened. So I'm not sure that in the coming months or years, the detection approach will last, because as far as, again, it's my only personal opinion, people or organization will be less tolerant to an event because of the increase of the use and the potential damage and their willingness to maintain business continuity and so on and so forth.
No, I like what you said, Yanir. We actually agree, right? So what's interesting is at Illusive, we have a preventative capability, right? We go in and help organizations identify credentials and connection strings and data and identities that are out there that attackers could leverage and clean that up, right? Simply don't leave goodies laying around to allow living off the land attacks in the environment. Become proactive and go clean that up. And then we also use a deceptive method to backplant deceptive stories into the environment. So when an attacker gets a hold of a beachhead and they attempt to move, we're able, we're putting a minefield in their path, if you will. And we've seen this to be very effective, right? Because, if I get a hold of Yanir's system and I use his credentials to go only where he goes at the same time of day that he goes there, and only connect for about the same amount of time and move the same amount of data, it's very difficult for the security team to differentiate that behavior from normal, right? And so at Illusive, we're pretty aggressive about changing the game and using our automation to make it difficult on an attacker. So just waiting until after it happens, Yanir. I think MITRE's latest release this summer of their SHIELD framework, talking about becoming proactive, maturing into an active cyber defense. We're actually on the same page.
And have you found that you've changed your views as 2020 has moved along then, much more so than you would have done prior?
I'll let Yanir respond first.
I think 2020 just made us more mature. And from now on, I think time will be irrelevant. I do believe that in the holy triangle of PPT, and I'm not referring to PowerPoint presentation, I'm referring to people, process, and technology. So I'm totally agree with what Nick mentioned earlier. Start from the basic, add the right procedure to that, and use the right technology. That's about it.
Okay. And Safi, do you want to add any comments in there?
So earlier, when different question, when Wade was answering, he hit on one thing: visibility. Right? We got to have visibility. I do agree with both gents when heading to zero trust, but what makes it harder for us to have the same level of control and visibility into the endpoints. This is where most people struggle the most today. And just a comment on the UBA as well. The user behavior analytics, and they completely went haywire when we switched, when we went from working in the office to working remotely. The UBA, the AI piece of it, I think it's kind of stopped. We start producing much useful data just because everything changed. The field is not plain anymore, right? So a number of things will change. We'll see in getting into 2021. Ransomware being the biggest threat as well.
And what do you think companies will struggle with most as we move into 2021 and hopefully out of the current situation that we're all in?
I think going back to the office, right? Now, all of these, in somewhere, I hope, in 2021, we will be going back to normal life, the pre-COVID lifestyle. One of the biggest concerns of mine is, okay, it's great that we have been doing a good job of patching the laptops, patching the remote equipments, but at some point, all these hardware is going to come back into the office. And then what? It's easier to say that, great, you know what? We're going to have every machine quarantine. We're going to do A, B, C, and D on it to make sure it's sanitized. But then again, all of these really so all of these really require some resources. Now, resources is one thing that information technology, information security folks always complain about because we never have enough resources. So my biggest concern is when all these machines come back, what are you going to do with it? How do we make sure that these sanitizers are not interfering with their own secured company network?
Yeah, and I think, as I've mentioned earlier, it's the hybrid, I think, that will become the norm for people's working lives. And that, of course, puts much more of an issue because not everybody will be moving back to the office permanently. There will be that chop and change. And for me, certainly that seems to be a particular threat for the workforce and for you to get over. And so how do you cope with that landscape, that hybrid landscape?
I think Yanir has already been pointing to this and Wade in the discussion they had. It's like with the zero trust kind of approach that we were forced to take this year, essentially at some point in time, in order to be properly scalable. I think that'll just reflect now back into the offices. So it's like there is really, from my perspective, not a reason why I should, as a machine, return back to the office. Why I should let this in on the inside of the network. I can just treat the office, the normal office network, like I would treat any kind of home network, Starbucks or airport network. So it's like just keep them quote unquote out for the most of the time of the being, because frankly, for the vast majority of employees, that's going to be good enough. Rolling down that path really just requires you to take the lessons that we've learned of the past couple of years, and especially hard this year, with regards to how we are architecting our office environment or our products to the point that we do have better insight into how people are using SaaS services. So the user behavioral analytics, for example, that Wei was referring to, that's kind of stuff that is super helpful. And it's like, that's where you get proactivity, but that's also where you get monitoring across the board. So the reactive kind of side fully back into the game. It is just that the way we've been building systems and networks in the past has changed dramatically from where we are, from where we were 10 years ago. And I think that's just something that has now been exacerbated and accelerated across industries.
Okay. And do you think that will change continuously as we move forward?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one comment to make, just, for people to remember that this, in cybersecurity, the game is additive, right? We just keep adding new facets that we have to manage, they never go away, right? And so the work from home is here. It's here to stay. We will have users from now on that will take their company asset home, lots of them, and they'll work from home. They'll work from the coffee shop. They'll come back into the office. This is never going to end. The same way that, I remember, 15 years ago, it was, the age of the mainframe is over. We're done with mainframes. It's like, well, no, not really. They're still with us, and they're still going to be with us, 10 years from now, right? We just keep adding those systems on. And so learning to embrace both the new reality of work from home, but then also the old enterprise structure. Enterprise structures are going to be with us, and we need to do a better job in those structures because that's not going away anytime soon. Zero trust and cloud services and all that. Absolutely, got to embrace them. Got to manage them. Got to defend them and secure them. But enterprise structures are not going away anytime soon. We got to get better at that too.
And did you find that you had new clients coming to you during the pandemic that perhaps had not really particularly thought of their cybersecurity prior to it, both from a training aspect, Nick, and for the other guys from the products that you assist and deliver?
Yeah, we work with companies big and small, like small startups that are just doing this for the first time, don't even have a security person in place. And I'll echo Wade's comment there, is that security is an endless game. If anyone has ever read the book The Endless Game by Simon Sinek, it's you sometimes feel like you lost, right? If you get hit by an attack, or maybe you pass an audit and you feel like you won, but there's no end to this. It keeps going, and it's our jobs to keep the machine running and keep the business protected forever, indefinitely. Now, the smaller companies that are doing this for the first time, they're coming into this with, kind of deer in headlights. Like, I got to do everything. This is crazy. I got to get through a SOC 2 audit. This is the first time I've ever heard of that. And it could be really overwhelming. It's, I heard the example of, trying to drink the ocean versus just doing it one step at a time. So I can't stress enough, just going back to the basics and following some of these principles that are there for a reason. These audits are built around basic principles and meeting those basic principles, and looking at security as the endless game rather than passing an audit and thinking that you're safe.
Thanks, Nick. And Yanir?
It's interesting. I was thinking while Wade and Nick were talking about that, and I think that we are facing a new era in which the difference between, third-party contractor, vendor, whatever, and our own employee will be slowly disappear. Again, adapting the zero trust approach, because it doesn't matter if you work like was mentioned here, from Starbucks or from home or on the office itself. So it's interesting. We are facing interesting times, as they say, and we should, again, adopt new approach, more proactive approach. Interesting. Made me think.
Yeah. And do you think companies have learned from what's happened during the past year, and that they will take that forward into their cybersecurity as they move through to the new era that hopefully we'll all get back into shortly?
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. We saw it after the first months of COVID-19. Well, first of all, when you talk about cost-effective, companies, organizations realize that it's more cost-effective to let their employees work from anywhere at any time. So there are processes that works irregardless to cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, in a way, it's just an enabler for that. The CEO wants his employee to work from home anytime. Cybersecurity teams must allow it, must contain it, must put some, comprehensive control in order to make it secure. So definitely. I mean, what we learned in the first months of COVID-19 and what we have learned so far definitely will become useful in the coming years. No going back.
No. Safi?
Well,
Sorry, Wade, you wanted to
yeah,
comment?
just a quick comment. I mean, you know, Yanir is right, and yet, you know, there will be those companies that don't learn, right? There are organizations that look, even today, don't have good vulnerability scanning and patch management, right? Or aren't addressing identity, right? I mean, these blocking and tackling things like Nick was talking about. We know these things in the broader organization, and yet there are teams that, you know, there are organizations that are just struggling. And so I think it's a huge opportunity for security teams to give their company an advantage, right? Your organization an advantage, which is to enable the business, right? People want to work for organizations that support remote work well. And it's a good environment where I can do my job from remote and be effective because I've got the tools and the security to do that, as well as be in the office too, right? And so I think where security teams can really take advantage of this season is to step up and to mature the overall capabilities to help the business succeed. And we're seeing that, you know, Amazon's numbers are not hurting because, you know, organizations, you know, like that were well postured, you know, Gerald and company, they're doing well because they already had a successful remote workforce capability. And so they weren't troubled by this shift in environment. And I think that speaks well to the security teams at organizations that have learned the lessons and have proceeded forward. That's going to be popular.
Have you had to look at and this is to all of you really, the products that you are providing for your clients that they've had to change and actually giving you an opportunity to change and put more products on the market for companies that perhaps haven't used cybersecurity as much previously, or of course have to adapt it for their remote and perhaps more importantly their hybrid working? And Gerald, I know that you were set up with your clients for the remote working, but have you seen a difference within your market as well during this time?
So I think it really depends a little bit on the products that we're looking at. LogMeIn, we do all kinds of products. It's like LastPass is obviously a premier product in the security space, and it's like enterprise password management is definitely something that increased interest a lot. Same as for MFA and single sign-on, all that kind of good stuff. Because like I said before, we strongly feel that the identity is really taken the role of the traditional perimeter defense at this point in time. For some of the other products like GoToMeeting and some of the collaboration products that we're selling, yeah, obviously it's like, I mean, that was just a huge uptick. I think what was interesting to see is like how some of the social engineering attacks were trying to exploit our products for the various purposes, but because there's plenty of ways of doing so, and that is really a little bit of a catch-up game. It's like really preempting potential abuse of say email invite capabilities for some of those kind of products. That's very hard. So it's like trying to find the right balance there between making sure that our product teams can innovate across the board, but at the same time also then do what they want was important. But going back to the questions, like yes, like in terms of like making sure that the remote worker was appropriately secured was definitely one of the key elements, very much at the beginning of and now on. And I would say it's been a multi-pronged approach internally as well as with our customers to focus on enabling, but then also making sure, like Nick was definitely pointing out, it's people, process, technology, and it's truly in that order. So you've got to start with the people, and then you can look at the processes that they're supposed to be doing, and then finally you can go into the technology and roll that out. And it's like if you do it in any other way around, you end up with less than optimal results.
And do you foresee some new projects having to come onto the market as we move forward into 2021?
There will always be new products.
Business opportunity there for you all.
I think it's like integration of existing technologies in order to better support the remote work. I mean, to some extent, it's like enabling remote work requires a lot of understanding of new architectures, and it's like a lot of integration sometimes for companies to do this right. What I would be expecting is that there's a lot more integration going on, really focused on that new persona of the remote worker. Both from a feature capability or capabilities perspective, as well as from a security perspective, so that becomes a much more smooth experience. It's like thinking about how to patch and update systems or monitor them remotely. It's like from an endpoint perspective, I think that needs to be simpler especially for small and medium businesses. Large businesses can afford these kind of integrations, but I think driving those kind of capabilities in the small and medium business space, I think that's going to be a huge challenge and opportunity.
Yeah, and actually providing projects at a price point that those people can come into. Okay, Safi?
I'm sorry, there's some static on my headphones. I missed the last question.
So we were just talking about a price point to a certain extent for new products for those smaller and medium-sized companies that have had to consider the security landscape more so, and as we move forward into next year, price point in those.
Of course. So price point definitely changed. And one thing that I did hear from my group of information security professionals is one thing we never get is the right budget. So at least due to the pandemic, what we are able to, not Fusion specifically, but on the average, what I'm hearing is people are able to secure or a decent sized budget now. It was always the problem with cybersecurity is the way we are perceived. If nothing's happening, if there are no attacks, there are no breaches, the common perception is maybe maybe these guys are not doing much. And when you get breached, the question comes, why am I spending all the budget and you're getting breached, right? This is always the hard part. However, so back to your original question, I think the price point, the ability to purchase more software is better, is greater now versus what we had pre-COVID. The budgets are definitely, for the most part, increased. Especially people are working remotely, and some organization was just given in a way is a blank check. Let's go spend on it. So we're definitely seeing this. The price change. People are able to bring in newer technology. So definitely some movement over there.
Thank you. And Nick, have you found that within the training field as well?
Yeah, I mean, it depends who you're talking to, right? We're pretty transparent with pricing stuff, conversation, just put it publicly available, but things are expensive, right? SaaS is super expensive. Everything costs over 10 grand a year. Everything is SaaSable now. So when you add up all the tools that you really want, I mean, no one has the budget for that. So especially when you're talking to a small business that doesn't even have a person to run it full time, and they're trying to figure this out for the first time. So yeah, I think organizations have to be picky and choosy on what makes the best bang for their buck, and where they can even understand the technologies they're buying to make the biggest impact for them. So, I think that's just always going to be a struggle, and there's different price points for different size companies. That's the reason why enterprise selling is a lot different than selling to a SMB market. And I think as we start adding more and more SaaS products to the world, everything's becoming SaaSable at a certain point, then I think choices are going to have to be made on where businesses can find or rely on necessary services versus nice to haves.
And so what do you think is the most important thing then for companies who can't afford it all? What's the most important item or product from each of the companies that they can use that would protect them best in the landscape that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, I love Password Manager. I mean, I think that's just, it's clearly, Gerald, you guys have great products there. It's kind of a necessity, right? Because I look at kind of, for us, we look at the employee side of this is like hiring the best athletes in the world to work at your company. And let's say they're football players, and then you put them in high heels. And you say, now go play the best game of your life. It's like, well, that's kind of unfair, right? You gave them not the right tools to get the job done. So when you look at things that make a big bang for the buck, I mean, two-factor, password, security awareness stuff, that's kind of generic, basic things that everyone should be doing. But more importantly, I think an underutilized tool is assessing our tools and actually seeing if what we're doing is being done. So examples like that are running practice exercises, simulations, things that you can do internally, mini audits of your own tools to make sure they're operating as expected. You'd be surprised that when you do that, you can find out a lot about yourself because no one's ever took the time to pause and look at what's being done today. So that's free, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's like, go ahead.
Sorry, carry on.
No, it's like I agree. It's like some of the basic stuff, particularly enabling people to do the right things, is critically important. Beyond that, and it's like I love you guys loving password managers for obvious reasons. But it's like I would also say it does depend a little bit on the space the company's in, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what their concerns are, what the crown jewels really are. That does change a little bit across the spectrum. So. I think that element, that part of like really performing a crown jewel analysis, performing a threat analysis in terms of like where you are, and then identifying the correct kind of mitigations for what's going on, that would be best.
And do you think that companies then, as we move into 2021, need to take some time to assess what they have and what they may need moving forward, particularly given, as we were talking earlier, about the panic when the lockdowns came in and the rushed jobs that perhaps companies did? Do you think it's important for them to take a step back and really assess what they need moving forward? Wade, do you consider that something that your clients will need to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you better audit what you're doing and how effective it is, especially when there's been big changes. One thing I will say, I like what's been said about SaaS tools. There's some pressure there and some cost. One thing I like about it from the security provider side is that it puts the pressure back on us to deliver value, right? Illusive sells our platform in a subscription model for a year, and what's great about that is it forces us, to deliver value to the customer in that time frame, as opposed to some of the older, perpetual license models where, once the decision was made, it was kind of a longer term thing. And so I think that's been really positive for organizations is that the technology providers needed to keep the value up by engaging the people and the processes, right? I know we're very cognizant about making sure that our customers are fully adapting to the use of our platform, so that they'll renew the technology and not just buy it, right? And that's been I think a super valuable thing. That it doesn't keep costs down per se, but it does keep the value up, so that organizations are trying, getting more value out of the tools that they're deploying. And leveraging the tool sets more exhaustively, right? Years ago, it was much more common, I think, to see a lot of overlap. Maybe an organization had a half a dozen tools and all of them kind of overlapped each other a little bit, but they weren't leveraging all of the tool. Now we're seeing security teams really leveraging the technology, that they've got. And I think that's been super positive. But assessments are critical, right? And how do you know what you're using and what you're leveraging? And again, you're not just assessing the technologies that you've got in place, but also, our processes. Are we using this well? Are the people well trained? What are we susceptible to? And I think that those assessments, at Illusive, we do those kind of assessments for lateral threat, and it's usually eye-opening for people. And I think we provide them for free, and so that's been that's been a valuable thing for our prospects and customers. Other companies do the same kind of thing, and I think that's something organizations should take advantage of in this season when there's been so much change.
Safi, do you agree with some of those comments Wade's made?
No, definitely. We got to agree that the landscape has changed, and as I foresee, we will see most of these pieces fall into place.
Yeah, lovely. And Yanir?
I try to look at things from the client perspective. You know, there are many cybersecurity companies selling wonderful products. At the end of the day, the clients want only one thing: to keep producing and, you know, maintain their business continuity. Now, we should, all of us at the industry must allow it in a way. So I'm not sure that client will assess their you know, structure or the product that they have bought so far. They will look how to maintain and to keep their business running, not just with COVID-19, but also with COVID, God forbid, with COVID-21. Yeah, I saw that. So I do believe that at the end of the day, and you mentioned the crown jewels, they will look how to protect their crown jewels, how to protect the end devices and maintain it works. And I do believe that what we are going to face in 2021.
Yeah, thank you. Gerald, how about you?
Oh boy, it's like I think there's plenty of things to think about what along those lines and what's going to happen. I think key elements here are going to be it's like really structuring. It's like structuring the entire program around a risk-based approach, right? It's like you got to understand what your risks truly are, what your risk appetite, what your risk tolerance levels are, and then prioritizing the various kind of investments around that. That obviously changes on an ongoing basis. And it's like, I like when Wayne was saying, making a point about the assessment, totally agree about that. It's like, I think actually the assessments need to be happening on a constant basis. And I think if anything, it's like, I would want to make sure that those are happening literally on a year-round kind of activity, because things change so much in terms of like how the internal infrastructure looks like, in terms of how products look like, how actually third parties software that interacts with your systems ultimately does so. So it's like really focusing on that assessment is super helpful, and then apply them literally to all the different areas, right? It's like two people. It's like, how can I measure how good the password hygiene for people is? That's one thing that we like to do on our side. It's like, do the scores go up or do they go down? And if they go down, why? And it's like, can we use, for example, security awareness and training in order to make them go up again on that end? So I think that bringing all these things together, I think that's a challenge going forward.
Yeah, and challenge for everybody as we move into 2021. We're coming near to the end of our discussion. We certainly gone through some interesting topics and the landscape that we've gone through and the landscape that's coming ahead for us and for our clients. Any last closing comments from any of you there? Nick?
Yeah, I would say, community has been something that is underutilized. So just like Wade was saying, there's things that they do free that are available for people. I think getting more companies to not fight the fight independently with their own organization is working with other organizations, other partners, other products, what it be, but building around the community that we do have, we don't use that enough. So our goal, and I think that the security group peers goal and everyone else's goal should be like looking for other partnerships, other ways to work with each other to help each other out, to figure out how we can beat this game together versus just trying to fight it by ourselves.
And did you see more of that happening during the pandemic, or do you think it offered an opportunity for that to work?
I think it made people think for the first time about that. It's like, yeah, there's no way we're going to be able to figure this out on our own. Asking for help, calling people, trying to figure stuff out. And although that's kind of a forced way of thinking about it, is that, you know, we should be proactively looking at, well, who do I know in my network that I can actually have a conversation about? And we need to do that more. And if we do that more, we're going to learn a lot more from each other and make ourselves better.
Thanks, that's great. Well, guys, I think we're coming to the end there. So I'd like to thank you all very much for your attendance on the Insight Jam today. And I think it's been useful and interesting topics we've discussed today and this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Stay safe.
Thanks.